All right. I've started recording on my end as well. So I think it's a good idea to let people in. All right, cool. So greetings, good morning, or shall I say good night to you, right? From your part of the world, Dr. Nicholson?
Yeah, good morning. It's 1 a.m. here.
1 a.m., so good morning it is. And may I ask, is it a Monday or a Sunday for you?
Well, midnight, I suppose you'd have to say it's Monday.
Ooh, wow.
After midnight.
So you guys are...
We're celebrating today on the holiday, and we're going on a boat trip.
Oh, really?
Yeah, down the river.
So I think it'd be nice to share. So where about are you streaming from today?
It's a little village called Coranda. It's in the hills rainforest, just inland from the coastal town of Cairns in North Queensland, Australia.
Wow, wow. So 13 hours ahead of us as we speak. And was it 14 hours ahead? I think you're 14 hours ahead of us.
Could I put it the other way? Could I put it other way? You're behind us.
Yes, yes, we are. And so I remember before we started streaming, you had mentioned that it's a very small population where you live as well. So
yes,
it's very much it's a place of peace, I assume, and very natural.
Yes, it was a hippie village, and there's still a lot of that philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of talk about environment and peace, and not necessarily in an organized religious form. Yeah, it's a very interesting place, and we have lots of tourists from all over the world.
That is beautiful. I do want to ask you, actually, so with regards to just your time spending there, is this a place you are visiting, or is this a place that you're going to be living for some time?
I'm speaking from my home office. I'm now fully retired since the end of last year.
Oh.
And I'm speaking from my home office. I've lived here for about 17 or 18 years. I retired from a government position, but they continued to send me work. So I used to work from home, and then I opened up a bookshop in the village. But that's all finished now.
That's pretty cool, though. That's pretty cool. So in retirement...
While I was doing that, I did my doctorate. Sorry?
They still pull you out of your retirement?
Not anymore. No, I'm getting too old.
All right. I'm thinking like, there's a lot of movies where someone, they attempt to retire and then their work follows them.
That happened to me. I moved to an island off the coast. Took early retirement, but the work still chased me. But I think I'm too old and out of touch now. So I spend my time more on these sort of things.
Yes, yes, and they're very worthwhile. Very, very worthwhile.
Very important, I think.
Yes, indeed, indeed.
We're talking about the future of the human race.
Yes, of course. And, not just the future, but definitely one that many have not contemplated. Because especially with the title that we have, a lot of people, they have a whole different conception of what this presentation is going to be about until they actually join, they hear what it's about, and they say, oh, really? This is interesting. Because almost everyone, they have not been exposed to something along the lines of what you're going to be talking about today. So
exactly,
it's
definitely still bogged down in the old world order.
Yeah, and the conceptions that that a lot of people have through fear mongering and all of that relates to really restricting freedoms that people have to share knowledge. And here we are. We're going to be doing something that hasn't been done in a while, talking about this.
but it's time, because all the troubles in the world, plus the virus problems and confrontations between the great powers, are causing people to really be concerned about the future, and they're starting to ask more and more questions.
Yes. And this presentation, for those of you who are joining from Zoom, from Facebook, from YouTube, this is something that's going to be a very unique perspective. And we definitely suggest that you share this with your friends, particularly people who may have spoken about this subject and they were exposed to only one narrative. We would like you to see a different narrative, a different story, and the possibilities for the future of the human race that has been so long oppressed through ignorance imposed by those that create fear. They create a different narrative, one that is far from the truth of what the world could have.
Yes,
Will have, yes, indeed.
The message ultimately is one of hope for the whole human race.
Yes.
There may be dark times, but ultimately it's a message of hope.
Yes, especially as it gets darker. Now, I would like to present our speaker today, Dr. Graham Nicholson. He is joining us from Australia. He has graduated with an LLB with honors in Uni Western Australia in the mid-60s. This is in the 1960s. He practiced law briefly as a solicitor before moving to Darwin in 1974 as a public lawyer. First member of the new NT Department of Law on grant of NT self-government. Can you please clarify, what does NT stand for?
Northern Territory.
Northern Territory.
Part of Australia.
All right. So he was the first member of the new Northern Territory Department of Law on grant of the Northern Territory self-government, the first Northern Territory Crown Solicitor. Later, the Northern Territory Senior Crown Counsel with the Northern Territory Department of Justice, and signed the bar roll. Dr. Nicholson was a legal advisor to the various Northern Territory Legislative Assembly Committees on Constitutional Development, and also an LLM UQ. Can you explain what a LLM UQ is, please?
Master of Laws at the University of Queensland.
Beautiful, beautiful. He was also a former adjunct professor in law to the Northern Territory University, now CDU. Could we clarify what?
It's called Charles Darwin University now. The name changed.
Darwin University. Interesting. Yeah. He retired from the department in 1998, and Dr. Nicholson practiced as a barrister at law, lecturer in law, and has now recently retired from that. He was a former proprietor of Hidden Words Bookshop in Kuranda until 2019. And there's a lot of items that are widely published. I know a PhD was awarded to you at Charles Darwin University in 2019. Can you elaborate when you say widely published?
I've written a few books and many articles that have been published. This is one of them. The talk today is one of my articles.
So, for all of you joining, Towards the New World Order, a Baha'i Perspective, you can find this online by searching for this with Dr. Nicholson's name, Dr. Graham Nicholson, and you can find one of the many articles he has written on this subject online for you to read yourself at your own convenience. And this is, again, just one of the many works he has written, because not only is he widely published, he has spoken and written on a wide array of subjects that are of great concern modern day. Now, I will give a topic description. If you read the introduction to the Dawnbreakers, Nabil describes the wretchedness of the Persian state and society in the 19th century. It reads, Persia as a feeble and backward nation divided against itself by corrupt practices and ferocious bigotries, inefficiency and wretchedness, the fruits of moral decay filled the land. It is not entirely inapposite to suggest that the state of Persia in the 19th century bears some resemblances to the state of the global society in the early 21st century. The global order has been described by Baha'u'llah as being lamentably defective. It has been described by Baha'u'llah as being lamentably defective. And from many points of view, it has deteriorated since he used those words. We find serious division, conflict, corruption, moral decay, and wretchedness in the world. The beloved guardian encouraged believers to study the Dawnbreakers. He said, read books such as the Iran, some answered questions, Nabil's narrative, and you will appreciate the truth of his mission, as well as the true spirit he creates in whosoever follows his ways. The Dawnbreakers were the Baha'i, now part of the Baha'i faith. The Dawnbreakers were the Baha'i pioneers led by the Bab, forerunner to Baha'u'llah, like John the Baptist to Jesus Christ, who challenged this terrible state of affairs in Persia and called for radical spiritual and social change. It called for great steadfastness and courage. So it follows that we as Baha'is have been called to embrace the same challenge for all humanity and for the whole planet and its well-being. The 1990 Gulf War ended, as it started, with a ringing declaration from leaders everywhere that the world had entered what they were pleased to call a new international order. Whatever this expression or concept means to its authors, human conflict continues throughout the world, as it always has. Labor continues to be exploited in third world countries under the pressure of the expanding international market economy to meet the demands of multinational companies and the needs of the wealthy consumer countries. Breaches of human rights continue to occur unchecked. The possibility of constructing a new world order based on peace, harmony, cooperation, and reciprocity is simply assumed to be an elusive dream. The refusal of the generality of humankind to realistically and voluntarily embrace the concept of world peace as a necessary and practical option for implementation within our near future. The failure of the greater mass of individuals to actively seek out its realization and the stubborn adherence to old patterns of behavior means, in the view of the Universal House of Justice for the Baha'is of the world, that such a peace will have to be reached through a continuance of the present suffering and turmoil that is sweeping the face of the earth today. In light of these comments, it will come as no surprise that the term New World Order is nothing new to Baha'is. Ye dwell in one world and have been created through the operation of one will. Blessed is he who mingleth with all men in a spirit of utmost kindliness and love. Central to Baha'u'llah's model of the New World Order and the pivot upon which it is to be constructed is the concept of the oneness of mankind. World order can be found only on an unshakable consciousness of the oneness of mankind, a spiritual truth that all the human sciences confirm. It is not for him to pride himself who loveth his own country, but rather for him who loveth the whole world. It must, however, be a unity that is built upon a recognition of and respect for the differences that exist between the various members of the human race, whether of color, race, language, cultural and ethnic background, or otherwise. With that being said, this is what Dr. Graham Nicholson will be speaking about today. I leave the floor to him. If you have questions as we go along, if you have questions now, please ask them, and Dr. Nicholson will be glad to answer them during the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, John. So, Should I read that?
We have the PowerPoint up, right? No?
Yep, it's up.
Yes, yes, please let us begin. Or do you want to have readers? Do you want to have readers read it?
Yeah, well, I think somebody else should read it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Does anyone want to volunteer to read? Alex Boyson, would you like to volunteer?
Gladly. Oh God. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Good.
Yeah.
Oh God, make our souls dependent upon the verses of thy divine unity, our hearts cheered with the outpourings of thy grace, that we may unite even as the waves of one sea and become merged together as the rays of thine effulgent light. That's from Abdul Baha.
Page 5. So, folks, we're looking at the term New World Order. That has been in vogue in recent years, was used by former General Secretary Gorbachev and adopted by President Bush in the Gulf War when he proclaimed a New World Order. Page 6. So I ask, has it become a term of cynicism? Because to many, it's not a new world order. Most of the problems of the existing world order still threaten, and we still have many problems in the global system. It's a very unjust system, in my opinion. Thank you. We move to page 8. This page 8. Yeah, that's it. We have many prominent people throughout the world calling for radical change. The chorus is increasing. But the fact is, we have a world order built on this concept of the sovereign nation state, where that individual nation is all important. And the purpose is to satisfy the interests of that nation, whichever nation it may be. But that idea of a sovereign nation state is becoming part of the problem, because it's not a basis on which to, in my opinion anyway, to construct a radically new and just world order. Having said that, I'm not opposed to nation states. It's just that it's the predominance that is the problem. Thank you. Now, if anybody has any comments, please raise them. So, accompanying these calls for reform, we see many calls for reform, and radical suggestions are starting to appear. Like, we know the United Nations organization is not working effectively enough, and there are calls for the changes in that respect. There's a call for greater use of multilateralism, which has been under threat in recent times, and with it, greater international cooperation. And there are even calls for a global federation. All of these ideas have an international emphasis. So we have perhaps somebody could read the quote from the Universal House of Justice. And I'll volunteer. No volunteers? I'll read it then. The quote is, "The call for unity for a new world order is audible from many directions. The change in world society is characterized by phenomenal speed. A feature of this change is a suddenness, a precipitousness, which appears to be the consequence of some mysterious rampant force. The positive aspects of this change reveal an unaccustomed openness to global concepts, movement towards international regional collaboration, an inclination to warring parties to offer peaceful solutions, and a search for spiritual values." So, page 12. So this movement is not a new movement in a sense, because if you look at the sacred writings of the great religions, they have had this concept of the brotherhood of man going back through many centuries. And it's had a powerful influence on people's thinking through the centuries. It's not just an expression of the survival instinct or self-interest. It's, if you look at it, it is a recognition of our common humanity and our spiritual interconnectedness of all peoples. And it's fed by the chaos and troubles in the world that demand a more peaceful, fairer future. If you look at the recent literature, it's full of talk about interconnectedness, the interconnectedness of all things and of all peoples. It's a very prominent theme. Page 13.
So we have a reader. Next quote you have.
We have a reader, did you say?
Yes, we do.
The Universal House of Justice has pointed out that the practical implementation of this vision is at long last within the reach of nations. The Promise of World Peace, 1986. The Universal House of Justice has proclaimed that world peace is not only possible, it is inevitable. It is the next stage in the evolution of this planet. All the nations now not only proclaim their readiness, but also their longing for peace and harmony and for constructive solutions to the enormous problems they face. The paralyzing anomaly, as the Universal House of Justice points out, is that while there is a ready assent given to the need for global peace, there is also uncritical assent given to the notion that human beings are incorrigibly selfish and aggressive, that the differences that divide humanity are regarded as being more pervasive than those that unite, and that therefore a lasting peace remains out of reach and need not be seriously pursued.
Thank you very much. This question of selfishness and aggressiveness is now a matter of hot debate amongst the experts, psychologists and the like. And I think that idea is increasingly being challenged in the sciences as well as in the social humanities. We cannot just assume that that's the natural state. Thank you. We're moving on to 13. But obviously, so far, humanity hasn't moved towards this new concept as a practical option. We're still clinging to our old practices and ideas. They have a very strong hold on people. And the Universal House is saying that as long as we continue with these old ideas and practices, the present suffering and turmoil in the world is going to continue until at least there's some recognition that this new approach is necessary. We can see that in the world today. Just about anywhere on the planet you look, there is suffering and turmoil. By way of comment on that, when I was much younger and used to travel quite a lot internationally, most places in the world you could go to. But if you look at the situation in the world now, there's so many of these places are not safe anymore. The situation has deteriorated, I think. We could go to 16, sorry. Here's another quote. The Universal House of Justice, the ruling body of the faith, is quoting from the founder of the faith, Baha'u'llah. Somebody might like to read the quote.
I'll volunteer again.
Thank you.
The winds of despair are, alas, blowing from every direction. And the strife that divideth and afflicteth the human race is daily increasing. The signs of impending convulsions and chaos can now be discerned, inasmuch as the prevailing order appeareth to be lamentably defective.
Now, bearing in mind this was said over 100 years ago, the words have been borne out in practice. We've seen the 20th century was a very destructive century. We had 2 world wars, as well as many, many other conflicts. And these we experienced here in Australia with particularly in the Second World War, when the Japanese came very close to Australia. And it was only through the combined efforts of Australians and Americans that was turned around, but it was very close. Australia was itself bombed in many places. So we can see the great vision of Baha'u'llah when he wrote those words. So we're moving to 17. So Baha'u'llah is saying that the fundamental defect in the affairs of the world is the lack of human unity.
Do you need someone to read it?
Yes, please.
The fundamental defect in the view of Baha'u'llah is the lack of unity in the affairs of the people of the world. All the other problems besetting humanity are but symptoms of this basic deficiency. It is this that must first and foremost be addressed. He states, the well-being of mankind, its peace and security are unattainable. I lost it.
Unattainable unless and until its unity is firmly established. This is the issue that Baha'u'llah puts before the peoples of the world, to go to the root of the problems that we have. It's not the only solution, it's just saying that it's the foundation on which the solutions must be built. Page 18. So he's saying that we must create unity in the world. It's not a call for reform. It's a call for radical adjustment and replacement of the present order. You know, all things have a life. They perform their usefulness, but eventually they past their use-by date. And Baha'u'llah is saying, in effect, in modern language, the present world order has passed its use-by date. And it is time for a new world order based on unity of the planet and all peoples. There's a quote there somebody might like to read. Where's our reader?
Alex, would you like to read this time?
Yeah.
And if anyone else wants to volunteer, please feel free as well. You're more than welcome to jump in after this quote.
The necessary solution prescribed by Baha'u'llah is the union of the peoples of the world in one common order. The call is not one for the reform of the present order, or for attention to be given to any of the ills afflicting it. Rather, it is a call for the replacement of that present order. It has outlived its usefulness to humanity and carries within it the seeds of its own destruction. Human society, Baha'u'llah states, must be either reborn or perish. His emphatic promise is that such a rebirth will occur, to be incorporated in a new global system which will deservedly warrant the title of a new world order. To use his words, soon will the present day order be rolled up, and a new one spread out in its stead. The day is approaching when we will have rolled up the world and all that is therein, and spread out a new order in its stead.
If I could comment a little bit more on that, it sounds in itself to be a bit worrying, but in fact it's a promise of hope. It's saying that we have to and will construct a new just global order based on universal principles, and that this will be a better order, a more just and peaceful order for all of humanity. So it's a message of hope. It carries within itself its own threats, because anything worthwhile requires effort and trouble to accomplish, but the end result will be something that will give us great hope for the future. Thank you. So I'm moving on to 20. This is a further elaboration of what we've been talking about. The Baha'i teachings say that the accomplishment of this new world order will have a twofold process, one positive and one negative. One is pulling down by trying to hold on to the old world order, which is, as Baha'u'llah said, lamentably defective, and it's gradually being replaced by an integration, planetary integration, so that the two processes, it's like crossing my hand. One is going down and one is going up, and at some point, the one going up is going to predominate and evolve into a new global system. Thank you. 21. And I'm suggesting here, I'm quoting from Professor Robert Scalapino. I don't know whether you know Professor Robert Scalapino. He passed away in 2011. He was an American political scientist, very prominent, especially in Asian studies. And he served on various bodies in America, prominent bodies. And I thought his words were very apposite. The emerging signs of hope. Should I read this one? The term multipolar is far too symmetrical to do justice to the present situation. In truth, we are living in a semi-anarchic world with few power poles. Only the most primitive and uncertain means of resolving disputes among nations exist. We're still groping in the effort to move away from such concepts as the absolute sanctity of national sovereignty and the assumptions that despite the impact of global interdependence and the communications information revolution, domestic policies are the only concern of the national government directly involved. That, I think, if you reflect on it, it's a pretty good assessment of where we're at in the present system. I think he was a very enlightened man.
So we have 2 new volunteers for reading as well, just so you know.
Yeah, somebody could read the conclusion to his article.
I can read. We are on the threshold of the most promising age in human history. While it is perhaps premature to herald the birth of a new world order, the abundance of problems should not obscure the dramatic growth in peaceful international cooperation and the extraordinary opportunities to turn science and technology to the service rather than the destruction of individuals everywhere. The New World Order, Rhetoric or Reality in 24 Hours, special supplement pages 11 through 12 and 15.
I really applaud, he's a great man, Dr. Scalapino, a great American and a great humanist, I think, and he had tremendous insight. We may now move to page 24. I'm skipping all these intervening pages. They're just for your interest. So here we have a quote from the guardian of the Baha'i faith, writing nearly 100 years ago now, with great vision. Perhaps somebody could read that quote.
Yeah, Eileen?
The convulsions of this transitional and most turbulent period in the annals of humanity are the essential prerequisites and herald the inevitable approach of the age of ages, the time of the end, in which the folly and tumult of strife that has, since the dawn of history, blackened the annals of mankind, will have been finally transmuted into the wisdom and tranquility of an undisturbed, a universal and lasting peace, in which the discord and separation of the children of men will have given way to the worldwide reconciliation and the complete unification of the diverse elements that constitute human society. The promised day is come.
What a wonderful vision. We know that some Christian and other groups see the end of life, end of the planet, the time of the end, but that's not how the Baha'is see it at all. We see it as a process, strife torn, but leading to a new global order. And when you read some of the ancient scriptures, they talk about the coming of a golden age. And I think sometimes some other religious people lose sight of that. This is an age of hope, not an age of termination and destruction. Thank you. Page 25. Shoghi Effendi again, if somebody could read that quote.
Ben, could you read it?
Yes, I can read it. The fires lit by this great ordeal are the consequences of men's failure to recognize it. Adversity, prolonged, worldwide, afflictive, allied to chaos and universal destruction, must needs convulse the nations, stir the conscience of the world, disillusion the masses, precipitate a radical change in the very conception of society, and coalesce ultimately the disjointed, the bleeding limbs of mankind into one body, single, organically united, and indivisible. The promised day is come, page 127.
Here again, we see, notwithstanding all the troubles that we're now in and have been for a while and may yet get worse, there is this great hope of the future for all humanity. Thank you very much. Page 26. So this teaching, the Baha'i teaching that I'm putting to you, is quite revolutionary. It's not reforming the old system, it's calling for a radically new global system based on unity and spiritual principles. And it's going to happen anyway because it's the result of the human forces already at work, tearing the current system down and gradually, as I said, integrating humanity in many ways that are not always publicized. And the Baha'i view is not revolutionary in the sense of Marxist or other man-made doctrines. It's not advocating violence, it's not advocating confrontation, it's not advocating politically divisive techniques that we see so often. It's a spiritual approach that calls for the unification of humanity in a new order. Thank you. Moving to 28. So the point here made is that to approach this, we must do it from a basis of principle and understanding the purpose for which men were created to carry forward, as Baha'u'llah says, an ever-advancing civilization. This is what Baha'is are about. This is our message to the planet, taken from our founders. And we're not to be diverted by all the many popular little ideas and advocacy that we see in the world. Our emphasis is on the unity of the human race under the one God of all people. 29. So we're looking at a unique period in human history. It was never possible in any earlier stage to achieve global unity. If you go back into history, we were brought up in very small clusters, which have gradually evolved through larger and larger clusters to the point where now we can see the world as one planet.
It's working.
Sorry. Was somebody going to say something?
I think that was
Please,
someone joining us and they were just muted, so don't worry.
Oh, okay. Perhaps somebody could read the quote from Abdul Bahar.
Miss Eileen?
Okay. There are periods and stages in the life of the aggregate world of humanity, which at one time was passing through its degree of childhood, at another time its time of youth, but now has entered its long presaged period of maturity, the evidences of which are everywhere visible and apparent. that which was applicable to human needs during the early history of the race could neither meet nor satisfy the demands of this day and period of newness and consummation. Humanity has emerged from its former degree of limitation and preliminary training. Man must now become imbued with new virtues and powers, new moralities, new capacities. New bounties, bestowals, and perfections are awaiting and already descending upon him. The gifts and graces of the period of youth, although timely and sufficient during the adolescence of the world of humanity, are now incapable of meeting the requirements of its maturity. Foundations of World Unity.
Just reflecting on that, the very fact that we're able to meet on the other side of the planet, and that this is going out to the whole world if they choose to read it or hear it. The fact that we have these techniques now available is reinforcing the applicability, the argument for the applicability of a new age, a new world order. I think it's a wonderful age to live in, really. Page 30. So we're now talking about the day is approaching. Perhaps I'll read this one. Unification of the whole of mankind is the hallmark of the stage which human society is now approaching. Unity of family, of tribe, of city-state and nation have been successfully attempted and full established. World unity is the goal towards which a harassed humanity is striving. Nation building has come to an end. Think of that now, all these new countries that have now become nations in their own right. The process is basically finished. The anarchy inherent in state sovereignty is moving towards a climax. A world growing in maturity must abandon this fetish, recognize the oneness and wholeness of human relationships, and establish once and for all the machinery that can best incarnate this fundamental principle of life. Page 32. So we, as Baha'is, use the term and have done for many years, the New World Order, but it has a special meaning to us. It's not the political or national concept of a New World Order. It's basically a spiritual principle, which Baha'u'llah says is going to come to pass. He says it's inevitable. A golden age, a new era of human brotherhood and spiritual discovery, of world citizenship. Baha'is, for example, regard themselves as world citizens. The establishment of the oneness of the human race. Baha'u'llah wrote, the world's equilibrium has been upset through the vibrating influence, this most great, this new world order. Mankind's ordered life has been revolutionized through the agency of this unique, this wondrous system, the like of which mortal eyes have never witnessed. Fantastic. We see these forces at work. Most people don't recognize their source, but it's happening before our very eyes. Page 33. So this is our task. This is the task of spreading the message of Baha'u'llah around the planet to all humanity. Somebody like to read the quote?
Oh, I'll read it. Bend your minds and wills to the education of the peoples and kindreds of the earth, that haply all mankind may become the upholders of one order and the inhabitants of one city. Ye dwell in one world and have been created through the operation of one will. Gleanings, pages 333 to 334.
I don't think I need to comment on that. It's so beautiful. What a vision of this one planet, one small planet floating in space, the home of one people. (34). And Baha'u'llah says that central to this concept of New World Order is the concept of oneness of mankind. Mankind is not a gender term. It encompasses the whole of humanity. World order can be found only on an unshakable consciousness of the oneness of mankind, a spiritual truth which all the human sciences confirm. There's no doubt we're all one human race scientifically. The differences between peoples are very small. Genetically, it's been established that we're one human race. Why can't we see that? That this is a spiritual truth. And it's not something on which we should build division. It's not a political concept, it's a spiritual concept. And if we adopt that into our consciousness and grasp it, it can change the human race. 35. Perhaps somebody could read Baha'u'llah's quote here.
Regina, would you like to read this time? I've sent a request on mute.
Actually, before we read the next quote, I just wanted to raise a point. These are as wise as Baha'u'llah was in terms of the wisdoms that he was preaching at his time. These are noble and worthwhile goals to move toward, right? But nothing that can be accomplished overnight. Because at the same time, the unity toward a new world order and things of that nature, we also have to take into account that not everyone will agree, right?
Yes. Well, obviously, most people don't agree with this. Well, you're quite correct.
Yeah.
It's not something that can be done overnight. It's a process. It's an ongoing process. And it's a process that has been going on for quite a while. It's not something new, but like all such radical suggestions, they take time. People have their own interests, their own prejudices, their own history, and it's very hard to change. You're quite correct.
Yeah, so much similar to like a mathematical asymptote, right? It's something noble to strive for, and perhaps maybe one day we'll never touch it, but at least we can get pretty darn close, right?
Yes.
May I add something? May I add something? One of the things I have discovered living in the United States as a Black person, things like the Confederate flag and monuments, removing Confederate monuments. We never thought it would happen, but each time it did happen, there had been a martyrdom, which to me represents a sense of the unleashing of a spiritual energy to create change. And forgive me, but I'm beginning to see how it works. As Baha'is, we need to teach human beings how to rethink who they are we see that science is intersecting with spirituality. So the infrastructure is there. It takes a major event that convinces human beings in relative unity to make the change. So I believe it is happening and it will happen, and it's already done. But we have to do our work. And thank you for your provocative presentation.
Yeah, I think that's a very good comment. Yeah, both the comments are good comments. It's happening, it's been happening, it will increase as time goes on until we learn that this is the way forward to establish peace and unity on the planet. It's not, it may take centuries to be fully accomplished. But ultimately, I don't think there's any option. But looking at you people on the screen, you're on the other side of the planet. And yet I feel as though you're my brothers and sisters already. This is the power of the Baha'u'llah teachings, that it can change the consciousness in individuals' minds. And you see it in the Baha'i community. When the Baha'is meet, you see people from all sorts of ethnicities and races, but meeting together as if they're all the same, equal, same race. It's a wonderful thing to see. And no doubt it happens outside the Baha'i community too. And this is a force that's spreading through the country and the planet. But we are created as human beings with a degree of free will and free thought. Hopefully that will continue. And we have to embrace it as our own to make it effective. Maybe this program will be a little tiny little contribution to that. I wonder if we could have the quote read.
Regina, would you like to read that quote?
The tabernacle of unity hath been raised. Regard ye not one another as strangers. Ye are the fruits of one tree and the leaves of one branch. It is not for him to pride himself who loveth his own country, but rather for him who loveth the whole world. The earth is but one country, and mankind its citizens. Gleanings pages 218 to 50.
I must say, I have adopted the last sentence as my sort of favorite quote, which I often use. We're still quite welcome to love our country, but our country is part of a bigger entity, and we love the whole human race. It doesn't exclude love of your country or whatever, your background, your history, but it's a wider loyalty. It's a very powerful thing, I think, that I think in time will have a huge influence on the world population. I think it already is starting to have a huge influence. So we're moving on to 37, if no more questions or comments. I thank those two contributors, please, for making those comments. This takes the point that we've been making a little further. It's saying that the root cause of the resistance to these ideas is prejudices of different kinds, race, nationality, color, whatever you like to say, even gender, politics. We're born with these prejudices, and the old world order emphasizes these prejudices. And Baha'u'llah is saying that these are the root problem to overcome. And I put in that quote because I think it's particularly applicable to the USA at the moment about racism, which is, in the view of Baha'is, one of the major barriers to peace. I don't know whether anybody would like to read that quote on racism.
Alex, would you like to read?
Yes. Racism is one from there, or?
Yeah.
Racism, one of the most baneful and persistent evils, is a major barrier to peace. Its practice perpetuates too outrageous a violation of the dignity of human beings to be countenanced under any pretext. Racism retards the unfoldment of the boundless potentialities of its victims, corrupts its perpetrators, and blights human progress. Recognition of the oneness of humanity, implemented by appropriate legal measures, must be universally upheld if this problem is to be overcome. From the Universal House of Justice.
Thank you. If we turn over to 38, here I'm discussing whether these things can be adequately addressed by human measures such as international human rights conventions and declarations, enactment and enforcement of domestic legislation. And we've seen, I think, considerable progress in that respect, at least in Australia, where we have all these human rights conventions and we have domestic legislation that outlaws many forms of prejudicial conduct. But the point being made here is that whilst these are necessary, by themselves, they're not enough because they don't reach into the heart of the individual. It has to be moved from the heart, which is basically a spiritual movement. And it's that which gives these principles their force and which enables us to overcome these inherited prejudices which we all have. I have them, you have them. We're brought up with them. We sometimes don't recognize it, but they're there because of our history and our inheritance. And we have to replace those with this consciousness of the oneness of humanity as a spiritual consciousness. And then we can reinforce them with these other man-made measures. Thank you. Page 39. Abdul Bahar is now talking about prejudice, which somebody can read the quote.
Vin, could you read?
Yeah. Let me. And the breeding ground of all tragedies is prejudice. Prejudice of race and nation, of religion, of political opinion, and the root of prejudice is blind limitation of the past. Limitation in religion, in racial attitudes, in national bias, in politics. So long as this aping of the past persisteth, just so long will the foundations of the social order be blown to the four winds. Just so long will humanity be continually exposed to direst peril. Selections from the writings of Abdul, page 247. And
if I'm right from my knowledge of what's happening in the US, you would relate to this very strongly, I think. The direst peril is threatening the human society. And we see it in not just the third world countries now, but in the so-called advanced countries. And it's threatening their very existence. Not an easy thing to do. And it's not something as that last commentator said, not something that will be achieved overnight. It's going to be a long, slow process, but we have to start somewhere, and the Baha'is are trying to show the way. We go to 41. We now move on to another aspect of the overall program, the vital necessity of religion as a pillar of the New World Order. We all know that religion is in decline right throughout the world, other than in the most extreme versions, which are often violent and cause much trouble. But I like to see those manifestations of religion as more the abuse of religion rather than true religion itself. To my mind, true religion was created by the deity to achieve peace and harmony and unity and justice, all these wonderful divine virtues, not their abuse. And we have to judge religion that way, that what is the purpose of religion? Is it how it's being practiced with all the prejudices and abuse and violence, or is there a better way? Baha'u'llah says there is a better way. Religion has to be part of the solution because it's the expression of spirituality. Should the lamp of religion be obscured, chaos and confusion will ensue, and the lights of fairness and justice and tranquility and peace cease to shine. Baha'u'llah is not saying that only his religion is the only valid religion. He's saying all these religions were established, at least in their origin, to achieve these high, noble qualities, but that religion has been corrupted. And it's time to get back to the truth of religion and make it the basis of the New World Order. Thank you. 42. This is the Universal House of Justice's take on the place of religion. Perhaps somebody could read that quote.
Eileen, could you read that?
Okay. No serious attempt to set human affairs aright to achieve world peace can ignore religion. Man's perception and practice of it are largely the stuff of history. An eminent historian described religion as a faculty of human nature, that the perversion of this faculty has contributed to much of the confusion in society, and the conflicts in and between individuals can hardly be denied. But neither can any fair-minded observer discount the preponderating influence exerted by religion on the vital expressions of civilization. Furthermore, its indispensability to social order has repeatedly been demonstrated by its direct effect on laws and morality. The promise of
Challenging, sorry.
Go ahead.
A very challenging statement that requires a lot of thought. Page 43. So what I'm proposing is that the Baha'u'llah's concept of a new world order has a spiritual basis founded on true religion. Now, I often get this question, what is true religion? Well, fortunately, there are some guides, and one of them is in the Gospels, which, of course, we accept as Baha'is. The fruits, we know them by their fruits. And what are those fruits? They are the divine perfections as manifested in the society and human relations. The virtues of God, the capacity to lead a peaceful, humble, truthful, tolerant life. If they are exhibited, these must be the fruits. And they can appear in many religions. There's been many cases of holy people who have exhibited these virtues based on their religious belief. But unfortunately, the reverse is also the case, that many religions have manifested quite divisive creeds and dogmas that pass under the name of the religion. We only have to look at more obvious examples of terrorism and destruction that now are very common in the world.
Well,
reinforces the view. Sorry.
Actually, to add on to that, could there be nuanced elements within what you just said? Like, for example, there could be good destruction and there could be bad destruction, right? Much similar to like the construction of prejudice is bad, but the construction of, you know, a generation that's prejudice free, that would be good, right?
Yeah. I wouldn't call that destruction so much. I would call that spiritual reform or readjustment of views. Destruction normally has a negative connotation.
Yeah.
And whilst the Baha'i writings are saying that some forms of destruction are inevitable, it's saying that that's because of the past and human approaches in the past that in effect have been brought on by these faults and negativities. We're not necessarily advocating destruction, but we're saying that unless we change, radically change to this spiritual base, the inevitable result is going to be the destruction. But I think what you're talking about, the destruction of prejudice, I would put it in a different way. I'd say, to my mind, it was a spiritual event for me. When I became a Baha'i, I was able to adopt these views. I didn't see them as destruction of prejudice. I saw them as a positive approach to attitudes and actions. I prefer to see it that way.
So you mean like a transformation of
Yes. Yes, a personal transformation. I mean, I was a long way from a perfect individual before I became a Baha'i. I was a bit of an old chauvinist in the white tradition with all these hang-ups and prejudices. And I was able to overcome those through the aid of the Baha'i teachings to change my attitudes and actions. Now I can deal with anybody. I don't care whether they're Asian or African or white. It doesn't matter to me now. They're all my fellow brothers and sisters. It's a wonderful relief in many ways, I think. It allows you to flourish. I hope that's of some help. 45. This just follows up the same point, that the Baha'i concept of unity is a spiritual unity, but manifested in in the physical world and leading to global unity. That which the Lord hath ordained as the sovereign remedy and the mightiest instrument for the healing of all the world is the union of all his peoples in one universal cause, one common faith. Now, this is very much a long-term prophecy. That's not going to happen, I don't think, for quite a long time, but we're certainly going to see major steps towards a global unity well before that prophecy is fulfilled. In a sense, I see all the great religions as one already in a progressive form, and that they're all evolving towards a universal cause or common faith. I see that, but I'm not anti any of the great religions. Please don't misunderstand. I think they've all had their contribution, and I respect them all. Okay. 46. We have a summary by Abdul Bahar that somebody might like to read.
Alex, could you read this?
Yes. Is that chaos and confusion? All right. All right. Chaos and confusion are daily increasing in the world. They will attain such
Intensity
as to render the frame of mankind unable to bear it. Then will men be awakened and become aware that religion is the impregnable stronghold and the magnificent light of the world, and its laws, exhortations, and teachings the source of life on earth.
Again, we're back to this destruction point. We're not advocating the destruction, but because humans in the main are still clinging to these outdated notions of old world order, they're bringing them on themselves, the chaos and confusion. And in a sense, that's necessary for people to change their direction in life. If you think about the past efforts to achieve global unified institutions, it took the First World War to lead to the creation of the League of Nations. It wasn't an adequate body, but it was an attempt to bring the nations together. It was brought on by the chaos of the First World War. And then we had a Second World War, which then was the impetus for the creation of the United Nations. Again, an attempt to bring the nations of the world together, but not a perfect body. It's still got many weaknesses. But the fact is, the enormous problems and chaos created by those wars had this effect of causing people to look for a better way of managing society. And we may well be on the verge of another such event. I'm not saying what it'll be, but it may be more chaos and confusion. Page 47. I'm not saying that these ideas are easy to accommodate. They are very radical ideas. They're not the way most people go about dealing with the problems of the world. They're non-confrontational, non-political. very much clinging to outdated divisive notions. People are very selective in the way they attack the problems. They don't see them from a universal basis of principle. And religion itself is attacked, commonly attacked. I've read recently that membership of religions in the US is on the decline, perhaps apart from a few more fundamentalist religions. It's a very difficult concept, I think, for people to grasp. And yet, to me, it's a very compelling argument, to which I'm very much committed, and many other Baha'is are the same. I think really you have to sit down and think about this very carefully and assess the values of the principles that are being put forward, and whether this is the way of the future or whether we should continue to cling to old world order notions. It's a big challenge. That's brought up in the next one, 48. That's just raising some of the problems, particularly of church authorities. I'll leave you to think about that. If I could move on to 49. The comment that this was a process, which I said in relation to one of the comments earlier, suggests that the debate will largely continue in the world about where we're going and what are the solutions. Is going to continue to be driven by pragmatic secular ideas. But it seems to me that the problems of the world are increasing, not decreasing, but increasing. You can think of many: environment, wars, disease. If you look at the problem, economic, if you look at the problems facing the world, they're really quite staggering. Many inequities and unjust things happening. Sorry. Somebody going to say? So I'm putting to you quite a different proposition to take you away from these pragmatic secular approaches to a quite new approach, one at the level of spiritual principle, as distinct from pure pragmatism. I'll just read that final quote. The primary challenge in dealing with issues of peace is to raise the context of the level of principle as distinct from pure pragmatism. For in essence, peace stems from an inner state supported by a spiritual or moral attitude. And it is chiefly in evoking this attitude that the possibility of enduring solutions can be found. So we move on to our final quote. You're a very patient, quiet audience, I must say. I hope I've stirred up some thoughts. The final quote, we're offering the Baha'i experience as an example of an expanding unity on a global scale. It's very open, the Baha'i faith is very open, both in its principles and in its activities. There's no secrets. The Baha'is welcome examination, impartial examination of their affairs. And if anybody wishes to examine them in all their complexity, and they are very complex in many ways, they're always very welcome. Look at that lovely example there of all those different people of different countries. That's quite common in Baha'i meetings. Wouldn't it be lovely if the world was like that? Can be, and will be. I believe it will be. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your presentation. The last quote, did we read this on the top? The Baha'i experience, did we read that?
Yes, please do.
If the Baha'i experience can contribute in whatever measure to reinforcing hope in the unity of the human race, we are happy to offer it as a model for study. From the Universal House of Justice. There are some questions. I have received some questions from Chance Wilson. There is the encouragement of Abdul Baha of the concept of federalism in the Baha'i faith as a solution to the world's problems, as uniting a diverse peoples under one common system. And the belief is that federalism offers those solutions.
Yeah.
So my question from him is, in gleanings of, sorry, he said not gleanings, lights of guidance, it says that the goal of the Baha'i faith isn't to remove any issue of a country's constitution. I'm going to read the quote that he provided, and he wants to understand what it means. So under Lights of Guidance, item 1461, not our purpose to violate any country's constitution. In quotes, this is from The Guardian. Let them proclaim that in whatever country they reside, and however advanced their institutions or profound their desire to enforce the laws and apply the principles enunciated by Baha'u'llah, they will unhesitatingly subordinate the operation of such laws and the application of such principles to the requirements and legal enactments of their respective governments. Theirs is not the purpose, while endeavoring to conduct and perfect the administrative affairs of their faith, to violate, under any circumstances, the provisions of their country's constitution, much less to allow the machinery of their administration to supersede the government of their respective countries. This was from a letter of The Guardian to the National Spiritual Assembly of the United States and Canada, dated March 21st, 1993. Also found in World Order of Baha'u'llah, pages 65 to 66. So Chance's question relates to this quote as to what the vision is of the Baha'is for a system to make world unity work. And he also asked about how Baha'u'llah said in the future there's going to be kingship, that the establishment of a constitutional form of government in which the ideals of republicanism and the majesty of kingship, characterized by him as one of the signs of God, are combined, he recommends as a meritorious achievement. And The Promised Day Has Come on pages 73 to 76, The Guardian quotes many passages from the writings of Baha'u'llah, lauding the principle of kingship and envisaging an increase in the monarchies in the future. The House of Justice suggests that the study of this section of the book will provide us with understanding that we seek. And this is dated from a letter from that Universal House of Justice to an individual in September 29, 1977. So Chance's question is, what do you envision, given this information of federalism, of monarchies in the future. How do you envision the future world?
I suppose to answer that question properly, you'd have to say the Baha'is envisage two stages of the universal peace. One is a lesser peace and one is the most great peace. We don't need to worry about the most great peace at this stage, but the lesser peace is seen as a political association of all the nations of the world in some form of constitutional unity. And the Baha'i writings say very clearly that that's not something that the Baha'is are involved in, because Baha'is are strictly non-political. We're told to obey the laws of the countries and to respect lawful governments. So these are statements that relate, I think, primarily to the lesser peace. They're not statements saying that this should happen or that should happen, that there should be more kings and monarchs. It may well happen, but it's not something that's essential to the Baha'i teachings. If it does happen, well and good. Baha'u'llah certainly praised the station of just kings. He's not saying all countries have to have monarchies, but if they do, he's saying it's usually a very good form of government. And when I look around the world, I find that the countries, usually the countries with less troubles are monarchies, but that's not to say it's essential. So we're not involved as Baha'is in establishing monarchies or overthrowing governments. That's certainly none of our business. We're supportive. If it comes about at the lesser peace that there is some sort of a universal convocation of all the nations to establish a new global constitution, then it's probably going to be of a federal nature, because we're not advocating nations disappear. If you look at the Australian Federation and the American Federation, it's made up of several states that joined at different stages, and they came together at some point to establish a federal government, but still preserved the autonomy of the individual states. That's the same much the same in Australia. So you could relate that sort of principle to a global federation where there was an overarching global body, but the nations still existed and still have their autonomies and privileges, perhaps on a more equitable basis as a part of a just world. So there may be international laws and national laws and then local laws that still might exist. But these are not prescriptions of the Baha'i faith. They may come about and they may be very effective, but they are talking about the stage of the lesser peace. And I should say, one of the emphasis in the Baha'i writings is the opposition to any form of tyranny. So we envisage that these things will happen in a fairly democratic way under the rule of law. I think the rule of law is fundamental to the Baha'i teachings. And Baha'is, of course, respect the rule of law and uphold the rule of law, and decry any forms of tyranny in the world. And there's quite a few examples of tyrannies. So my answer to that is, we're concerned about the spiritual unification of the planet. That's the Baha'i goal, not with the politics. The politics will happen, certainly at the lesser peace stage. Our goals are more principle-based, more long-term, more spiritual.
So,
is that an adequate answer?
he hasn't responded as to that, but I think it personally to me was a great answer. And if anyone has a question on that, please put in the chat as to what was just answered. I do want to give, if there's no other questions there, one last question to you before we.
Yeah, sure.
This is a very important point, as you brought up multiple quotes in your presentation about the need for religion. When everyone realizes the need for religion, and we understand that the Baha'i faith, just as it is for society, it's also a very personal religion as to how we coordinate our personal affairs in our lives.
Yes, definitely.
So this principle that people understand the necessity for religion, and we just spoke about laws, if you don't have people who have a sense of morality, a sense of justice, a sense of the need to obey laws, no matter what laws we create, people won't follow them. I think that, and this is where I'm starting from, I think that this concept of the need for religion will arise where you will have a breakdown of, no matter what a government creates in laws, you'll have a breakdown of the execution of these laws. So no matter how many laws they write, you're going to have a superfluous existence of laws that only are followed conveniently by a people who have no sense of identity with their rulers, be it something that they elected themselves. So when you have this disassociation between the laws and the rulers and the systems that need to operate to make things work, and the people that are going and doing their own thing without respect for any system, any code of law, and the destruction that amounts from that, from this chaos because of a lack of order, and the oppressed become more oppressed and the oppressors get stronger when no one checks them. This system I see coming about, and I want to know if you see with your experiences being a lawyer yourself and having had experience with this sense of immorality in your life, confronting it more often than I believe most people here. Do you see this as that trend as to where the need for religion will really come in, this chaos that will amount from a disregard for utter human decency and code of ethics and laws?
Well, you can understand why a lot of people don't obey the laws, because basically the current global system, as applied in most countries, is a very unjust system. So if it's an unjust system, of course you're going to get people disobeying the laws. But then there's a higher principle here that if we're working to a new global order, it has to be based on just laws, and it has to be based on the principle that we have an obligation, individual obligation to obey those laws. That's what the rule of law is. And then we have to have just systems of review and relief through courts and other bodies that are impartial and not corrupt. Now, one of the greatest problems in the world today, which was forecast by Baha'u'llah, was the rise of corruption in government. And that's really very destructive. And that goes back to the emphasis in the Baha'i writings on the divine virtues. Unless you have a strong individual commitment to the divine virtues, trustworthiness, honesty, all those sorts of course, you're going to get this corruption. And it's happening throughout the world. It used to be something that we thought was only applicable in third world countries, but now it's very obvious it's in all countries. The whole system is being undermined. It's part of the collapse of the old world system. So we have to have this commitment to obedience to the laws, but we also have to have a just system, because how can you expect people to obey the laws if there's an unjust government? You have to have both. You have to have the virtues, the commitment to the virtues, and you have to have just government.
So both a just creation of those laws and the willful obedience of those laws. But of course, you have to have a faith that those laws are just. And
yes,
the governed also accept that they are just, not just one or another in an imbalance.
They have to be seen to be just. Unfortunately, even in the so-called democracies, a lot of laws are seen to be unjust and inequitable. Because this society is often unjust and inequitable. And you can't, one of the things I was really convinced of in my career was you can't solve these problems just by passing laws. That's not enough. Or by spending government money. A lot of politicians think all they have to do is pass laws and spend government money. It's not enough. You have to go to the fundamentals of society and the individual principles by which people are governed. These are all interrelated principles. The rule of law and virtues are all interrelated. Religion has its role to play in cultivating the right principles.
So lastly, we have one last question and we'll be done for today. Alex asked regarding a new paradigm, the paradigm shift necessary. How do you understand that paradigm shift as you just described what you were saying now? How do you think that paradigm shift will happen?
How do I think it'll happen? I think it is happening. I think we're already in the middle of it and have been for a while. I think it's been an ongoing process, particularly since the 19th century. I think we've seen dramatic change, more change than ever on earth since the 19th century. And it's an ongoing process. It's a paradigm shift across a whole panoply of areas. And it's affecting our consciousness. And the more it affects our consciousness, the more we'll put it into operation. And it's leading, I think, as Baha'u'llah says, to a new world order. Unfortunately, probably with a lot of negative events preceding it. But as I've said at the beginning, it's a prophecy of hope for the whole of humanity. It's an enormous shift. It's the most radical shift in human history, I think. We just don't realize it. It's already taking place.
I think to buttress what you just said about not realizing what's taking place, Alex commented, one is conscious among the Baha'is and the other is unconscious among the world.
Yep. Yep. A lot of it's happening and people don't really understand why it's happening or where it's coming from.
Yes.
That's the Baha'i job, I think, to bring this to people's attention. This program might be a part of that.
And the absolute last question, Alex topped it off by asking, but can a real shift happen without the consciousness side, without people being conscious of this shift? Even though
shift,
suffering, which will awaken the people, will there be change?
The shift in the Baha'i view comes from the revelation of Baha'u'llah that's caused a change which many people are not conscious of, but it's happening anyway. It's the Baha'u'llah says this is the divine will to achieve a united humanity, one God. Of course, it's going to happen quicker if people are conscious of it, but most people are not conscious of it. They think in pragmatic, materialistic terms. But the more and more I study it, the more I'm convinced it's sourced in these teachings of Baha'u'llah, which we say are from God.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nicholson.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Nicholson, for joining us today. You have really, really put forth a lot of beautiful quotations that people can, on themselves, they can go read and source from. Thank you so much for all this work you put into putting this presentation together. And lastly, for those who are interested in reading the work upon which this presentation is based, you can find Dr. Nicholson's, our presenter's article, Towards the New World Order, online. It is found on Baha'i Library. It is found on multiple sites. I think Association for Baha'i Studies as well, right?
Yes, it is. Yeah, just type in the title and probably my name or surname. It'll come up very readily on Google.
Yes, and we've also posted an excerpt of it on clearwaterbaha'is.org.
Yeah. And I want to thank you for bringing this topic up, because I'd forgotten I'd even written this. I hadn't even put it in my CV. Usually I list all the major publications, and I looked at my CV, it wasn't even there. And I want to thank you for reviving it, and I hope it makes some contribution.
We indeed are so happy that Jeremiah actually could remind you. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
But this is something that definitely people need to remember as these new events unfold in the next decade. It's definitely going to be a decade full of change. And
what's that? There's a picture in the back there of a big bridge over the water. I was wondering what that was.
Oh, so this bridge here is the Sunshine Skyway. It was a photograph I took on the approach entering Tampa Bay, which is this why the water is so calm looking. It's behind an island called Egmont Key, which it's
in Florida.
Yes, yes, it's a barrier.
It's an amazing structure.
Yes, it is. It is a very long bridge as well, and I recommend, if you ever visit Florida, to visit this bridge as a place to see.
Right.
You have some
I
public.
have a view that all the continents are going to be joined one day.
Yes,
by bridges, tunnels, whatever.
Well, hyperloops. But again, thank you so much for your time, your energy, your effort, and more importantly, thank you to everyone who joined us today. This was a very special session, as it is portending a future that we are yet to enter. And we have been in it, but what the events will occur, we don't know, but we at least have an idea. And these quotes, sharing with your communities, sharing with those who are curious as to what the Baha'i worldview is, this will give a very deep insight. This is just one of our sessions on Sundays. Please feel free to take a look at our YouTube channel, Clearwater Baha'is. Our Facebook is available on the Baha'i Center of Clearwater on Facebook. And we've been streaming this live. So for those of you who want to visit next week, it'll be again, same time on Sunday.
Very good.
Meet again. Thank you so much, Dr. Nicholson.
And a happy twin for all the Baha'is on the program. Happy twin holidays.
Yes. We will be celebrating the birth of Baha'u'llah in 7 hours time locally.
If I can get some sleep.
Yes, yes. We wish you a beautiful celebration, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Same to you.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.